I have a sense of emptiness, of dissatisfaction. The type that's only known to the most annoying of Z-tier video essayists. Like a wise astronaut once said, just because it's over doesn't mean it's really over. You may think you're done touching a subject, that you've explored it as much as you possibly can, and yet there's that sound. I got my start on this channel talking about Doug Walker. I covered his original show Demo Reel. I thought I would be done, and then I realized I wasn't, and I made a second video covering Demo Reel's return and the Nostalgia Critic episodes Demo Reel spawned. And once I finished that, I thought it was over. But then there was that sound, always ringing in the back of my mind. Are you truly, really done unless you've talked about Pop Quiz Hotshot? And you know what? Yeah. Maybe I do need to talk about Pop Quiz Hotshot. For those who don't know, Pop Quiz Hotshot was Channel Awesome's attempt to create an online game show built all around 80s nostalgia. Originally announced in 2013, it finally premiered in 2015 to extremely negative reaction, and despite attempts to salvage the show, it only ended up producing 12 episodes of what was supposed to be a 40-episode run. The fun thing about Pop Quiz Hotshot is that it's the rare Doug series that has no shooters, no fans, no diehards. Demo Reel was something Doug Walker put a lot of heart into, and that the cast clearly still hold a lot of reverence for. Nostalgia Critic is a long-running franchise that has as many people willing to defend it as it does people willing to criticize it. Even the anniversary films, while ridiculed now, were fairly beloved by fans at the time, to the point where each one has pages on TV tropes that unironically list moments tropers found emotionally moving.
Not only is he depressed over indirectly causing the death of a comrade for possibly the first time in his life, he is now on a mission to atone for his past sins, and convincing the government from getting rid of all online movie/video game/comic critics in the country through the Sucka Act. It hurt already with his curious, melancholy tone, but became all the more painful when Part 7 revealed that he wanted to die, with nobody giving a damn about him.
But nobody cares about Pop Quiz Hotshot. It was basically thrown onto the YouTube channel with no advertising, nobody ever asks any questions about it, Doug doesn't seem to care, fans don't seem to care, it came out, didn't get officially cancelled, and quietly went away. Pop Quiz Hotshot and Demo Reel feel like two different parts of the same coin. One was Doug's passion project, a serious attempt to craft a compelling and meaningful narrative series. The other was a corporate-mandated, unscripted game show that it seems like nobody wanted to do. And yet both represent Channel Awesome's attempts to branch off from the image of being a reviewed center website and into their own original material. Demo Reel came about as part of the content push post-Nostalgia Critic death. Pop Quiz Hotshot came about as part of the content push post-Nostalgia Critic revival, the Easter Sunday era of Channel Awesome. Both suffered from inexplicable delays, mid-season retools, and low view counts that ultimately led to an early cancellation. And the failures of both made it so Channel Awesome has never tried to do anything original at the scope again, in favor of just doing more Nostalgia Critic with the occasional side thing here and there. Now here we are, 10 years after the premiere of Pop Quiz Hotshot, and I'd like to go back and try to figure out what about the show made it such a wet flop with people. Because it's one thing if this was just a simple case of fans not wanting to support something that isn't Nostalgia Critic, but it's not that simple. Because we have evidence that people did want to support Pop Quiz Hotshot. We know this because it raised $90,000 in crowdfunding. I'm willing to bet that this is the highest budget given to a Channel Awesome production ever. And the results that came from it are, well, you can look at the clips on the screen. So with that in mind, let's start with the beginning, with the announcement of Pop Quiz Hotshot. So it's July 2013. At this point, Demo Reel has been over for months, and Nostalgia Critic has been running relatively smoothly. Not like entirely smoothly. This period of episodes is kind of divisive at the time for the new inclusion of cast members and skits and whatnot, but I mean, it's getting views, which is certainly something the site needed. Things were on the up and up, but it wasn't fully there yet. For those who remember from my original Demo Reel video, one of the first things Doug Walker and Channel Awesome did after retiring the Nostalgia Critic was purchase a studio lot in the Chicago area for the purpose of filming Demo Reel and other original programming. Now, the limitations of said studio space were already incredibly apparent in Demo Reel, just by the fact that they basically only ever filmed in the back rooms or on green screens, in a way that makes you go, I wonder if they never bothered to properly soundproof the actual studio space and now they're stuck filming in smaller, less echoey areas. It was clear that the studio space needed work, and work like that requires money, which, when you're running a show like Demo Reel that is actively setting dollars on fire, isn't something you have a lot to spare. And then when Demo Reel ends, it's like, well, you bought this whole fucking studio space for this show, and now you have to find a use for it when your new main content is Guy reviews movie in front of a white wall. All this to say that it's not necessarily a surprise that they would attempt an Indiegogo campaign around this time, launching it on July 29th, 2013. This was like the golden era for online content creators getting into crowdfunding. The previous year, the YouTube group Yogscast was able to raise $500,000 for their own video game, while webcomic Homestuck raised $2.5 million for a video game adaptation as well. Objectively incredibly successful crowdfunding campaigns, so long as you do not look up what happened to either of those projects afterwards. Websites like Kickstarter and Indiegogo were popping off hard, and it sent a message. There were fans out there who were more than willing to give monetary payment in order to help people they like make more things. And considering that this was the era before the widespread use of things like Patreon, or Twitch subs, or donations, or anything, this was the rare way that creators could get money directly from their fans without either relying on advertisements or physical merch. It's no wonder then that in a time of financial rockiness, Channel Awesome would join the crowdfunding crowd in order to help with their plans to expand beyond just being the Nostalgia Critic company. The Indiegogo, which is accompanied by a hostile and eerie promo video of Doug, is written in this strangely sarcastic, flippant tone for someone asking for money.
While there's many shows we're currently working on right now, one of them could use your help. And by help I mean money. And while I know many of you would like to just give us money for absolutely no reason whatsoever,
we find that's just not good enough for us. Instead, we want to give you something in return.
oh my god, an online game show? That's awesome!
What kind, you may ask? Shut up. Never talk while I'm talking.
After doing some ragging on the usual suspects, M. Night Shyamalan and Happy Madison Productions, they begin to explain that the Indiegogo is to help upgrade their equipment and sets to meet more modern, professional standards. They even explicitly mention the lack of soundproofing in the studio space that they bought 8 months beforehand. They then go on to describe what they want to do with the production improvements they'll be able to make, something known only as a pop culture challenge. It will be a show hosted by cinema snob himself, Brad Jones, focused on answering questions about 80s to early 2000s pop culture, with physical challenges implemented later down the line after they've done a few episodes and have their bearings. It's not mentioned in the actual text of the page, but the promo video promises that Nostalgia Critic will be in every episode. The whole structure of the Indiegogo is honestly a bit confusing because the title of the campaign is called Channel Awesome's New Shows and More, which makes you think that you're funding the shows, but most of the actual text on the campaign page focuses on renovating the studio the show is going to be filmed in. I know this may seem like a bit of semantics, like obviously improving the equipment and studio will then also benefit the show, but just to lay a seed here, I want to ask you a question. If you were a backer looking at this campaign page, would you think that you're backing the studio space or the show? The campaign started with a goal of $50,000, which I guess they fully expected to hit because they already had stretch goals prepared in their original announcement video. $50,000 ensured that the Pop Culture Challenge would actually get made and get 40 episodes. They eventually hit the $65,000 goal, which meant that they would do 52 episodes of a comic book series. Then they hit $75,000, which meant they funded 40 episodes of some show called The Gaming Gauntlet, not to be confused with Rooster Teeth's gaming show, The Gauntlet, which premiered a few months earlier. By the end of the campaign, they had reached about $90,000. This was just a little short of their final stretch goal of $100,000, which would have meant upgrading the studio so that it could be used by other productions who wanted to rent it out. I don't quite know why they needed $100,000 to do this, and they couldn't do it at $90,000, but going back to that seed I planted earlier, it's interesting that the top stretch goal of the fundraiser wasn't another show or more content, but rather promises to upgrade the studio space even more. But whatever, the campaign was a success. Yay! Awesome! Wow! There were a few updates on the Indiegogo page in the weeks after the campaign ended, all about fulfilling rewards and backer perks and all that, and then nothing. Just, nothing. The last post on the Indiegogo is from November 2013, just a few months after the campaign met its goal. There are comments made after that, mainly from backers who seem to be confused as to when their perks will be mailed out. It seems as if there was an issue getting the DVDs they were supposed to get on time, and they were handed a $5 gift certificate to the Channel Awesome store, which, like,
Whoa! This is worthless.
Silence surrounded the project for a while. Apparently stuff was happening, but backers were not being privy to it. Doug kept uploading nostalgia critics, still using the studio space and costumes and everything, and life seemed to move on. But the people who paid to see these shows were wondering where these shows actually were. It got to the point where apparently Indiegogo was investigating the campaign to see if it violated the terms of service because of the lack of transparency regarding the actual fulfillment of what they promised. What happens then is that Channel Awesome uploads a pilot for the game show, now entitled Pop Quiz Hotshot, to their website on March 31st, 2015, almost 2 years after the original Indiegogo campaign. And the results are disastrous. Very rarely does something show you what's wrong with it from frame one. And yet, the moment Pop Quiz Hotshot's pilot begins, you can tell that you're going to be in for a very, very bad time. We start with an uninterrupted shaky handheld camera bouncing between our host and our two contestants as they play what Brad Jones himself admits is a cheap dollar store fishing game to win some sort of prize. Whatever they're saying is essentially incomprehensible because the theme music they're playing, which is just repeating the same notes over and over again, is mixed so absurdly loudly that I thought there was something wrong with my speakers the first time I heard it. Doug's dad, who apparently is playing a character named Colonel Kink according to the credits, stands off screen and says some innuendo, I think, but we can't hear him, not only because of the music, but because there's only one microphone and it is being held by Brad Jones. This is the first impression of where the $90,000 and 2 years of time was put to use. This pilot is fucking awful. Like, I don't have any clever analogies or anything. It's fucking awful. It's embarrassing. I would be ashamed to put out something like this into the world. We get our title sequence, which explains the basic premise. Apparently Brad Jones always wanted to be a game show host, so he got a man named General Anesthetic, kidnapped a woman named Miss Stockholm and kept her in a dungeon, and is now kidnapping random people from the streets of Chicago and forcing them to be in his game show. There's a lot I can say about this premise. The reliance on a weird sexist stereotype of an enslaved girl in handcuffs, the inclusion of a black character who does nothing but point a gun and stay silent and intimidating. But more than anything, I'm just curious why this even needed a framing device to begin with. Most game shows don't have framing devices, even ones trying to be funny, and so trying to go for the whole, haha, we're kidnapping you because we're evil people thing comes off more bizarre than as an actual selling point for the show. The only justification I can think for including this is that old famous Doug clip about how he believes that all comedy derives from misery. He knows he wants to make a comedic game show, but he doesn't know what that means beyond make a show where the basic premise is that nobody wants to be there, because to him, that's the shortcut to a lot of jokes. But hey, that's just the backstory. You may be wondering, what is the actual game like? How does it work? Well, it's trivia. That's it. Contestants are given questions about various topics from the 80s and 90s and have to buzz in first. If they get it right, they get 10 points. There are various physical stages, such as the aforementioned dollar store fish catcher toy, and completing a paper maze, but the actual reward for winning said challenges is unclear, as it seems they don't give an advantage or disadvantage to the contestants. The only thing to spice up the question and answer segments is that at some random point, General Anesthetic will blow on an air horn, and whoever hits the buzzer last then has to put on a costume and answer questions as that character. So, for example, Max here has to dress up in what I think is a Disguise Inc. Dark of the Moon era Optimus Prime Halloween costume. I don't know, I'm not a Transformers fan. If the setup sounds incredibly dull, then that's because it is. Ultimately, what you're watching is people answering random trivia, which you can argue a lot of game shows are, but game shows usually have something interesting going on beyond that, even if it's just a sense of spectacle. And now is as good of a time as any to get into the actual production quality on display here, because oh my god. So for starters, this set is supposed to resemble the Saved by the Bell diner, but the end result gives off more Vacation Bible School. Like the type of build quality you see from a parent coming in on the weekends to help build the set for their kids' play. The nameplates for our contestants are written in the same type of marker that seniors use to write on their car on the final day of high school. The paint isn't smooth. You can still see the gaps in the panels on the walls behind them. Brad's nameplate looks like it was made out of construction paper. It screams, "We made a trip to Michael's." The actual technical qualities don't hold up much better. The camera is low quality, the lighting is flat, the audio issues from the opening don't get fixed. Brad is talking into a mic, but it's hard to tell if that mic is even on because it seems like his voice is actually being picked up by something else, leaving an audio discrepancy between him and the contestants. Our host is basically getting drowned out at all times by random comments and laughter. Shots are framed with too much headroom or space on the left and right. The overpowering music from the opening is still there, but only some of the time. You think this would be an improvement, except that it means that most of the episode is filled with extended silence and dead air with no real editing attempt to cut it down, creating an uncomfortable atmosphere rather than a sense of momentum. The editing is so sloppy that they actually left in 2 moments where Brad flubs lines and has to start them over again.
What talking doll said, "I know you are, but what am I?" In 1989, Bart Simpson became famous for telling viewers not... Do that again. In 1989, Bart Simpson became famous for telling viewers not to have a what, man? John.
A cow.
I also just think the way the game itself is constructed isn't that good. For starters, let's talk about the broad category of 80s and 90s references. A lot of stuff happened in that time, and you think that if you were making a pop culture game show all about 80s and 90s pop culture, you would keep the questions based around, like, movies or games or music or whatever, but there's no real limit placed here, which leads to weird moments where questions about Sister Sister lead into questions about the O.J. Simpson white Bronco and the Olympic bombing.
Which Batman actor also played Iceman in Top Gun? He looks exactly the same now.
Oh, Val Kilmer.
Val Kilmer. In what Lebanese city did terrorists drive a truck bomb into the United States Marine barracks, killing over 300 in 1983?
Plus, there's a fatal flaw in the game in which that there's no real rubber banding system, and by that I mean there's no system to help players who are behind early in the game catch up later in order to keep it competitive. By the halfway point of the episode, contestant John has basically curb-stomped Max, even without accounting for him having to dress up like Optimus Prime. They don't do the thing you'd expect from a game show like a Double Jeopardy, where points in round 2 are worth more, so there's no way to go against an early lead. It gets to the point where at the end of the episode, they have to correct one of Max's answers, but Brad decides not to take away the points because Max is at 110 and John is at 400, so it doesn't really matter. Whoever wins the most points, which in this case is obviously John, gets to go up against the Nostalgia Critic in a rapid quiz round. If John wins, he gets $100. If Critic wins, that money is pooled into the next contestant. To be honest, I can't tell what's going on in this section because, once again, Brad has the only mic, and he's passing it between the 2 contestants who end up barely audible compared to him. There's also no point counter on the screen, so it's impossible to keep up with who has the most points. The critic ends up winning, so John doesn't even get $100, and he gets escorted off stage. The end. This pilot was a disaster. You can still find the comment section from the day this was posted on the Channel Awesome website, and the comments range from incredibly hostile to, "It has potential," which is what fans say when a creator they like puts out something bad. It seems even Channel Awesome aren't proud of this one, as it's one of the rare Channel Awesome videos to have never been reposted officially anywhere to my knowledge. The only reason we still have a copy of it is because someone else uploaded it onto YouTube. It seems the powers that be are fine with this staying buried next to that Nostalgia Critic episode where Doug said the N-word. There's so much about this pilot that confuses me, and I'm sure a lot of other people as well. Because we have to remember that this pilot didn't come out of nowhere. In fact, it was apparently one of several different attempted pilots shot, meaning that this was their best effort of all their attempts to get this show working. You can even see the development hell in the fact that Brad goes from having hair to being bald in the same episode. All of this is after almost 2 years and $90,000. That $90,000 is a sticking point that's going to be the heartbeat under the floorboard for this entire series. Because you can't look at this pilot, all the money raised, and the time that it took to get any communication on it, let alone make it, and not be confused as to how a group that got $90,000 could end up with something like this as a result. A set that looks barely any better than it did in their announcement video, camera quality that you'd see in a vacation vlog, limited mics that are clearly not properly picked for the actual act of making a game show, echoey audio, and editing so sloppy that flubs are being left in the finished product. Just for a point of comparison, let's look at another production that was made in 2015 for around the same amount of money. Sean Baker's critically acclaimed film Tangerine. This movie about 2 trans sex workers was famously filmed around Los Angeles on 3 iPhone 5Ss for a budget of about $100,000. Just a little over what Channel Awesome got from its Indiegogo. They used an $8 app to control the aperture and focus of the iPhone. They used a Tiffin Steadicam Smoothie, which you can buy right now for like $150 in order to make the handheld shots appear more smooth. Post-production coloring was then done in DaVinci Resolve, which is a free program. The rest of the money for the budget was used to pay the actors, pay for catering, pay for locations, pay for a qualified sound guy. Now, is it fair to compare Doug Walker to Academy Award-winning director Sean Baker? No, but it is funny. But furthermore, it highlights that you could make a project that's quality for this amount of money, especially when you don't also have to worry about filming on location or paying a bunch of extras, so long as you know what you're doing and how to use your money and equipment responsibly. Seeing the money raised, the initial campaign, and the final result, one wouldn't be foolish for asking, was this all a scam? And you know, I hate that there's not a word for what I think this is, because I don't think it's a scam. Scam tends to imply intentional deceit, knowingly entering a venture to fraud your customer base for your own personal gain. And while these types of crowdfunding scams do exist, I often find that it's more common to see this other, harder to classify thing where one's genuine intentions to fulfill their initial promise is outweighed by the reality of their ability to achieve it. Which is to say, I don't think that Channel Awesome are scammers. I think that they are incredibly incompetent in ways that they have never ever bothered to fix. Sweeney's razor, or whatever that old saying is. It wouldn't surprise me if Channel Awesome had every intent to put the money they raised from the Indiegogo into the studio and the show and make it as good as it possibly could be. And a part of me can't imagine them just pocketing it. I'm sure the money did get used in production in some way, shape, or form, be it paying for the space they're in, paying the talent, gathering more Halloween costumes and fake guns for the fake gun wall. I don't imagine Doug Walker saw the $90,000 and personally went out to buy a jet ski for himself. But also, I can't blame anyone for speculating on misuse of funds, because where the fuck is the money on the actual screen? I want to go back to the seed I planted earlier. Was the Indiegogo for the studio, or was it for the show? Because technically the show exists, so the campaign promise was fulfilled, technically, by bare minimum. But also it seems like it wasn't, because the campaign primarily focused on improving the technical and production side of things, which is not clearly evident. It looks the same as the Nostalgia Critic, maybe even a bit worse. Even the Halloween costumes used are just retooled from old Doug projects, like how the Optimus Prime costume is the same one Doug wore in an episode of Demo Reel. There's no real sign on screen that any significant advancement has been made in Channel Awesome's production process. So what the fuck were they doing for so long, and why did they struggle with it? Channel Awesome has always been bad with communication, Doug especially. This is the same company that announced they were ending their flagship series with a random vlog posted the day after the character died. The same company who years later would respond to allegations of mistreatment from former employees with, "We sincerely regret you feel that way." So all of the questions are still, for the most part, questions. The closest we got to figuring out what happened with this pilot is through post-mortem interviews and statements in which it becomes increasingly clear that the show was the brainchild of Channel Awesome CEO Mike Machad, who asked the Walker brothers to simply make a game show with no other real instruction. With executives forcing you to make an entire type of show you don't want to make, maybe you do end up half-assing the final product until something sticks. But we're not done yet. Because, remember, the Indiegogo promised that this would be a series, and one episode does not a series make. they would need more to fulfill their campaign obligation. So in July of 2015, Doug posted an update on Pop Quiz Hotshot on his Facebook account. The big news being that Brad was out and now Nostalgia Critic would host. Which, to be honest, is probably how it should have been the whole time. So months later, and with a bunch of feedback to work with, how does the real show fare?
Are you ready, Ryan? Are you ready, Tom? Go! Get the bat nipples off of Batman!
You know, I'll say this right away. The lighting is better. One of the main cameras can't stay in focus to save its life, but the lighting is better. The revised version of Pop Quiz Hotshot still resembles the pilot in a lot of ways. The set is still the same, though this time lit with actual shadows. The questions are still pop culture based, but this time focused almost entirely on identifying quotes from popular movies and shows. I guess in order to avoid things like,
In what Lebanese city did terrorists drive a truck bomb into the United States Marine barracks, killing over 300 in 1983?
The theme song is the same, which is a shame because it sounds like ass. Even the basic premise is the same, except instead of Brad kidnapping people, it's Critic hoping that by kidnapping people he can make friends. Not to sound like one of those people who cares about Nostalgia Critic lore, but this makes more sense as the premise of the game show because it actually seems to go off of what we've learned about the Critic through things like the anniversary films and the My Pet Monster review, versus Brad Jones suddenly wanting to kidnap people out of nowhere. General anesthetic is still there, but Miss Stockholm is gone, I assume because they realized a joke about a woman being held there against her will isn't that funny when the actress playing her actually seems to be doing this against her will. They also added a live studio audience, and by live studio audience, I mean like maybe 12 people in folding chairs. There's also 2 additions to the rules. First off, instead of an air horn, contestants are now interrupted by tiny little creatures called the whoa! Doug, I have enough European friends. I know I cannot say that word. So, anyway, when the, let's call them slurries appear, there's a slur attack, and contestants have to buzz in, and whoever buzzes in last has to put on some sort of costume and do the impersonation like before, while the winner gets to watch a gory little cartoon starring the slurries made in Doug's strangely simplistic art style. The second rule change is more substantial, though. If the contestant answers the question wrong, but their answer makes the critic laugh, then they get the points anyway. This is theoretically a form of rubber banding, a way to avoid the sheer absurd curb stomp from the pilot episode by allowing people to get points even if they aren't as knowledgeable. But this one little change actually breaks the game as a whole. This is where I have to bring back a question from many, many years ago. Why do we watch game shows? For the sake of breaking this down, let's separate game shows into 3 different types of P. Do you watch a game show for the prize, the process, or the personality? Game shows that focus on the prize use the spectacle of a large reward to build stakes and emotional investment. The easiest example that comes to my head is Who Wants to Be a Millionaire, which is a simple multiple-choice quiz show that has an absurd cash reward at the end. But also think of something like Beast Games, where the game itself is rarely anything more than, would you like to eliminate yourself, and the only stakes are the amount of money on the line. I don't know, I could only watch 2 episodes of Beast Games before I wanted to walk into the ocean and turn into sea foam. Game shows that focus on the process are ones where the enjoyment comes from the act of following along and trying to play from home. The amount of money offered on Family Feud or Wheel of Fortune is pocket change compared to Who Wants to Be a Millionaire. But that feels irrelevant because the nature of the game makes them engaging to try to play along with and figure out the answers on your own. The gradual reveal of more letters in the phrase, or more survey results on the board, allowing a sense of build-up. Meanwhile, game shows that focus on personality rely on the charisma of the participants to carry it through. These shows can barely even be called game shows. Things like Taskmaster, or Would I Lie to You, or even Whose Line, shows where the points don't matter and nobody is seriously caring who wins or loses, because you're there to be entertained by what weird thing James Acaster is currently doing on BBC. Now let's bottle up all of this pee and use it to examine Pop Quiz Hotshot. Well, for starters, part of the appeal can't be the prize is only $100. And, like, I'll happily take $100 right now, but, like, that's kind of nothing? Like, for a working adult in the city of Chicago, when you account for transportation to the game show, food, time off work maybe, you'll, like, probably break even? Maybe get a few spending dollars after? They actually raised the prize numbers to $150 in later episodes, because I guess even Channel Awesome is getting hit by the tariffs. But that still ain't much. Certainly not anything to keep viewers on the edge of their seat. The process of the show can't be part of the appeal because the show is just a basic trivia game. Even in its revised state, it's a simple game of recognizing the quotes. Now, far be it from me to say that trivia is boring. Fun little Emily fact here, when I was a kid, I used to get bored in church, so instead of a Bible, I would bring this pack of movie trivia cards and memorize it during sermons. But the way it's implemented here doesn't seem to bring out any excitement in the players, nor is it particularly compelling to play along with as a viewer at home. All that's there is figuring out where the quotes came from and naming a media property. It's less a game and more that image of needing to yell out McDonald's at your TV in order to end a commercial. Congrats, you identified a thing. So that leaves us with personality. More than anything, this is the P that covers Pop Quiz Hotshot the most. I mean, at this point, it's basically marketed as the Nostalgia Critic game show. There's an understanding that all hope for this show rests on the Nostalgia Critic. The people will love that. But the problem is that a host can only do so much. Doug's job as the critic here isn't to be the spotlight, but to be the facilitator of the games. He can say jokes and make his little comments, but at the end of the day, he is but one element acting out the show each episode. The rest rely on the contestants. And oh man, the contestants. Look, I'm going to be real with you. I'm not going to bully random internet people who were on a bad game show 10 years ago because they happen to like Nostalgia Critic and live in Chicago. That would be a shitty thing to do. And if you want to bully the people who were on this show 10 years ago, you are also being incredibly shitty. It's not their fault that Pop Quiz Hotshot is bad. But also, like... ugh. So when I think of Pop Quiz Hotshot and its whole thing of we're a comedic game show where the whole bit is that we're torturing our contestants, the closest point of comparison I can make is actually another online game show, Dropout's Game Changer. For those who don't know, Game Changer is a game show where the premise of the game changes every show, and it's up to the contestants, moments of, to figure out what the rules of the game are and what they need to do to win it. Part of the reason why Game Changer works so well is because of the talent. Host Sam Reich isn't just bringing in random people who sign up to be on Game Changer, he's bringing in colleagues, comedians, performers, people he's worked with for years and who have proven their improv capabilities because there's an understanding that Game Changer is a comedy show more than it is a competition. Because of this, Sam is allowed to get away with audacious ideas like trapping his contestants in an escape room, or forcing them to do a time loop, or even something as simple as play a game where all you can do is answer yes or no. There's a sense of trust built up where he knows what the players can handle and what they'll respond well to in order to make a fun episode of the show. Pop Quiz Hotshot doesn't have this because it's not using actual performers or colleagues or friends or whatever. It's using random people like any game show would. And normally that wouldn't be a problem, but because so much relies on these people's abilities to, say, do impressions or play off Doug comedically, these episodes live or die not by the quality of the game or by the actions of the host, but from the talent of the contestants. And thus we lead back into the aforementioned make the critic laugh rule. By setting this in stone, what it's doing is encouraging players not to simply answer with what they do or don't know, but to try to make this complete stranger who they probably also idolize to some extent, laugh. And what that means is that Pop Quiz Hotshot is an 11-episode series of people doing bits. Sometimes this can be in the form of playing a character. Rather famously, there's an episode where one of the contestants spends the entire time as Ed from Ed and Eddie, of his own accord, clearly to the annoyance of everyone else there, and never once breaking character. There's also another episode where one of the contestants is like a common writer type of character who is almost entirely silent. That was fun, I guess. More often than not, though, the laughter rule leads to people trying to make the critic laugh by telling his own jokes and references back to him. In its worst moments, Putt Putt Hotshot feels less like watching a game show and more like watching a Q&A at a convention. The type where everyone is going up to the microphone not to ask something, but to audition to be the fourth McElroy brother. It's the game show equivalent of the guy who deep-throated the microphone at RTX 2013 to prove that he should become a member of Achievement Hunter. It's non-sequitur spoken in the hopes to make friends with a stranger whose work you like, rather than engaging with them creatively. It makes it so that no matter how good or bad the production around the show is, it doesn't matter because the entire thing feels so goddamn cringe to watch.
Which Batman movie had the line, mistletoe can be deadly if you eat it, but a kiss can be even deadlier?
Batman and Robin?
In Big Trouble in Little China, which character said, "I'm a reasonable guy, but I've just experienced some very unreasonable things"?
Oh, Han Solo, of course. I'm sorry. I've not seen Big Trouble in Little China.
You have finished this line from The Princess Bride. Life is pain, Highness. Anyone who tells you different is...
You've broken my camera!
Which Dudley Moore film had the exchange, "I'm going to take a bath, I'll alert the media"?
It's really confusing to me because episode 7 of the show sort of works. Instead of normal randos as the contestants, this time we have Brad Jones and Uncle Yo, who you may remember as the guy Doug cheated on with Ego Raptor in Demo Reel. And because this episode is made up of people who are professional entertainers, who are friends with Doug and have history of working with Doug, they're able to bounce back at him and deliberately antagonize him. When the slurries moment happens, neither of them ring the buzzer because they want to mess with Doug and see what happens if they just don't play by the rules of the game. They both throw in jabs at the pilot for the Pop Quiz Hotshot and the reception of Demo Reel. In this episode, and this episode alone, Pop Quiz Hotshot becomes something closer to Game Changer, a show that allows for Doug and his friends to bounce off each other comedically under the guise of a competition. And it makes you wonder why the whole show wasn't like this, right? Like, I get that this was 2015 and Americans hadn't discovered British panel shows yet and couldn't rip them off, but still, at the same time, this was 2015. Not the golden years of Channel Awesome, but not the empty shell it became after the 2018 mass exodus. What if Pop Quiz Hotshot was an excuse to bring in other Channel Awesome members and associated acts and have them compete? Why create a game show so reliant on the small Venn diagram of people who like Nostalgia Critic and also live in the greater Chicago area, rather than the actual talent Doug knows? My only guess is that they were worried about the transportation costs for talent and wanting to keep things as close-knit as possible to save money and keep filming episodes week to week. But certainly it would be easier to buy a plane ticket for someone who is supposed to be your friend than it would be to gather up 12 strangers from the city and hope they work out for the best. The show itself limped on for 11 episodes, with only the first episode able to crack 100,000 views. This was in the era where Nostalgia Critic episodes were getting millions of hits. It kept going until December of 2015. During that time, it had to take a hiatus so they could focus on things that actually made money. The show didn't really change much throughout its run, nor did it significantly improve. At some point, they hired some sound people, which is why you can see them change mics like at least 3 times throughout an 11-episode season. I like to say that this made the audio better, but if anything, it just made the entire experience even more weird. Like when you notice they're holding display mics while having lav mics attached to them. At the end of episode 11, we get the credit card asking for submissions for contestants, and then nothing else. Pop Quiz Hotshot never got an official cancellation notice, nor an official finale. It just stopped uploading. Word has it releasing 12 episodes of a promised 40-episode series was enough to fulfill their Indiegogo promise. They wiped their hands clean of it and never thought about it again. The set for Pop Quiz Hotshot would be retooled for the comic book show from the Indiegogo, which debuted next year under the name Awesome Comics. It's nothing remarkable, just another nerds talking about nerd things show. It ended in 2017. The Gaming Gauntlet, whatever that was, never saw the light of day at all. Who knows what that was all about. In 2018, Channel Awesome would move out of the original studio space that this whole Indiegogo was focused on. And I still don't know if they ever fucking soundproofed that shit. Pop Quiz Hotshot is such a weird oddity in the whole saga of the Nostalgia Critic. It came, it got no fans, and then it disappeared. And even amongst the haters, it doesn't get brought up that much because I think it's just not as fun as other Doug failures. Part of the fascination people have with something like To Boldly Flee or The Wall Review is that it's this weird, scrappy project you can tell Doug is putting his heart into, even though the results are incomprehensible amateur slop. But Pop Quiz Hotshot reeks of attempted corporate desperation, an artifact from the era where they wanted to sincerely branch out and become a real production company, where they wanted the allure of having a studio space they could invite guests to and people could film things in. I've talked in previous videos about how Demo Reel's failure stuck Doug in a place where he can't be anything else but the Nostalgia Critic. And I think the same can be said here, but for Channel Awesome as a whole. The company had the opportunity to grow. They raised $90,000 to establish themselves as a legitimate production force, and they just didn't do it. Instead of improving their technical knowledge, putting in the effort to really try for something big and great, they coasted along their usual shtick, and then, surprise, no one watched it. And this is something that only works once. On one level, because you only get one unfulfilled crowdfunding campaign before people don't trust you anymore, and another because, well, I don't think people care anymore, like, about Channel Awesome. This is my third video on Doug Walker and Channel Awesome. I made my first one over 4 years ago now, and I'm going to be honest with you. When I scroll through Channel Awesome's YouTube page, I see decay. I see Nostalgia Critic episodes barely managing to hit 200,000 views. I see Doug vlogs being watched by only the most diehards and nothing else. I've seen people swear to me that newer Doug content is good, that Nostalgia Critic has stopped doing the skits and is getting more into insightful criticism, and maybe he is, but I don't think that matters anymore. I don't think the Nostalgia Critic is reaching new fans. Channel Awesome is a husk of its former self. The website is down and simply redirects to the YouTube page. There aren't really any contributors outside of the main Nostalgia Critic crew. Clipless reviews haven't been a thing for years as they struggle to find a new studio space to film these things in. I'm not saying this because I'm wishing for the downfall of Channel Awesome, like I'm twiddling my fingers, personally hoping for Doug's demise. I'm saying it because I feel like the writing's on the wall. It's over. It's really over. Channel Awesome isn't the company it once was, and it'll never be that company again. When I see Doug making an appearance on Smiling Friends, I don't see it as a victory lap showing that he still got it. I see it as an aging rock star still on tour and playing to the irony-poisoned nostalgia circuit, because that's what's left. And that leaves us with Pop Quiz Hotshot, almost perfectly in the middle of Channel Awesome's history. In a lot of ways, the last chance the company had to really prove that it was worth more than just Doug's personal projects. And they showed that even with all the money in the world, they couldn't do that. Because Channel Awesome is not a serious company, and it will never be a serious company. So why should we look at it as if it'll ever amount to anything serious ever again? I think it's time for us to stop remembering Channel Awesome. It's not something any of us have to do anymore. This video was all about low-stakes comedic game shows, and if you want an example of, like, an actually good comedic online game show, you should check out Abolish Everything, a show in which a bunch of extremely funny people make their arguments to a panel of judges about what mundane aspects of society they think needs to be abolished. You can watch new episodes of Abolish Everything on my streaming service, Nebula. If you're not aware, Nebula is an independent creator-owned streaming platform that specializes in thoughtful content, from essays to documentaries to classes to even original shows and movies. There's countless stuff to choose from there, either from creators you know or from potentially new faves. For example, Riff Tracks is on there, with hours of hilarious movies and shorts to watch. Plus, we recently got the newest project from Team 4-Star, Space Duck Video, making exciting new original content. And Nebula has original content from yours truly, including my video essay about Gordon Ramsay's inability to make grilled cheese, which the British Film Institute labeled as one of the best video essays of last year, and yes, I will brag about that, because I think that's neat. Plus now Nebula has guest passes, meaning that monthly members get 1 guest pass to Nebula per month to share with a friend, and annual or lifetime members get 3 guest passes per quarter. So when you find a show or movie on Nebula that you want someone you know to watch so they can obsessively geek out about it with you, you can bring them into the fold without you having to spend any more money or them having to give out any of their own payment info just to do a trial. No cost, all reward. And what's cool is that by going to nebula.tv/LadyEmily, you can get 40% off the cost of a yearly subscription, making it only $36 or $3 a month, which makes Nebula an incredible value when you consider the large amount of art and thoughtful original work that's hosted on the site already. So I want to once again thank all of my patrons who literally help keep me afloat during these long gaps between videos. I really hope that the gaps can be shorter from this point forward, especially once I move. But just really want to thank the patrons for really helping me out. Specifically, I'd like to give special thanks to Darrenost, Hannah Green, Lord Solar Thomas, Maxwell Lynch, Highman III, Ross Vincent, Stephen Galvin, and Weeaboo William. Thank you all so much. I literally could not do this without y'all. So I know I've clowned on the Doug Walker TV trope pages a few times now, but I really need you to see this one moment that was labeled as a crowning moment of heartwarming on the TV tropes page for LGBT fans. Just because I'm kind of mystified by it, and it's kind of a good example of just how fucking weird these TV trope pages can be when you actually dig into them.
You're definitely not a showgirl.
No, well, no, not anymore anyway.
Really?
Yeah.
I'm finding out so much about you.
Indeed.
With that figure, you were a showgirl, really.
Yes, absolutely.
It doesn't shock me that you used to be a woman, but with that figure, that really fascinates me.
There is a niche for me.
Really?
Yes.
And obviously you have found that niche.
Yes.
Is it a niche with a leash by any chance?
Not only on alternate Saturdays.
Okay, because I like that stuff myself.
Indeed.
Can you invite me to it?
No.
Oh.